What's going on, guys? Welcome to LowKick MMA preview for UFC 258, Usman vs. Burns, the fight that we've been waiting for a while now because it was originally booked for June last year, I do believe. We're finally getting it this month. I'm Ryan Galloway. Joining me is Jordan Ellis. Jordan, what are your thoughts on the card?
I think it's a good card. I was looking at it just today and I was thinking, sometimes you might want to miss the prelims, but I just don't think you do. It was the early prelims are, really like Gillian Robinson against Miranda Maverick opening up the whole card. And then Gabriel Guin against Philip Rowe, Ricky Symone against Brian Callahan. They're three bangers of fights, and I'll be tuning into this one as early as possible. And I'll be watching the whole way through it. And then obviously to top the card, we've got a title fight. So brilliant. Looking forward to getting into it.
For sure. And we'll jump straight in on that title fight. And like I mentioned, it was meant to happen June last year. Do you think there's any big difference with the delay in the timeline? Like, it meant to be in June and now it's happening again in February. And both fighters have known for the past, 7 months or whatever that is. They've known that their next opponent would be each other. And obviously, they're former training partners. Do you think the length of distance we've had between the initial booking and now makes a huge difference in this matchup?
Not particularly, because they know each other. They've trained together. I just don't see it having any difference. I think it's a negative, if anything. You've had more time to kind of sit and stew about the fight and wait for these contracts to be signed, and it only seemed to get made official a few weeks ago. So how hard can you train when you're not sure if you're fighting or not, and things like that? So interested to see it. I don't think it changed a lot. I think both of these guys are going to come in super fit. I think they're both going to have good game plans for each other, and we're going to get a really good competitive fight.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think if it helps anyone that bridge of time, probably Usman, because of the change in coaching, and he's got to adapt to his new coaching staff, and obviously Trevor Whitman's a veteran, but he's got to get to know Trevor's style, and he'd probably got a bunch more new tools to add to his arsenal that he didn't previously have in June of last year. So that might be the X factor. But the real X factor is the fact they're training partners, and these guys have been at it in the training room non-stop. They're both grapplers at their core. Do you think that both these guys are going to want to keep it standing because they've felt each other's wrestling game and grappling game? Or do you think one of these guys sees an advantage in that department, is going to utilize it?
I expect Usman to try and use the wrestling, not to get the fight to the floor, but do a similar job to what he did to Masvidal. He's going to press him against, grapple, try and get the odd shot off. I think he's going to try and stifle Gilbert Burns, who I think has the better hands and will be happy to box Usman. That's how I see it. But I'm sure these two know a lot more about each other. And how has Usman done on the ground with Gilbert Burns? Has he been able to, avoid submissions, or has Burns been tapping him out a lot? It all plays into it and how they approach this fight. And I trust both fighters that when they come in, they'll have the right game plan and we'll get a really fun fight. But I think Burns is going to want to strike. Usman's going to want to grapple against the fence.
I tend to agree with you. I think there's two ranges for Usman to win this fight, and that's if he keeps at range on the feet. He's got 7 inches advantage of reach on Burns, so he could stay back and just outpoint him, landing big jabs, and just keep him on the outside, or maybe mixes the two. He could push it against the fence and just do work on the cage. I don't expect him to take him down, though, because if he takes him down and ends up in his guard or in half guard, he's going to be in trouble. Whereas if he keeps it on the fence and just does more damage and neutralizes Burns' game, like he did to Masvidal, like you said, I expect that to be his best method to victory here. Interestingly enough, on my sports betting app here in Australia, Gilbert Burns is paying 8.5 times whatever you put on him to get a submission in this matchup, which I think is crazy because the guy is like a former world champion jiu-jitsu player and they're paying that much for a submission. So if you're a betting man, that's my pick of the day. But yeah, I see it going out one or two ways.
Yeah, and I think Usman, what's impressive about him for me is that he's so adaptable, and for every fight he's got a different approach. So Covington, he struck, Masvidal, he wrestled, and he's very adaptable, and each fight is different and the way he approaches it different. So I expect him to come in with a really good game plan and the most effective game plan. I think it'll be pressing against the fence, but you never know. He might fancy himself to strike against Burns, or he might fancy himself to survive submission attacks and be able to wrestle on the floor. So, but in terms of Burns, I think from what I can see, he's got the advantage in the striking. and I think that's his route to victory. Does he take that? Does he try and go for submission? You know, if you've tapped someone, I think he said they've done over 200 rounds together, so he's tapped someone 100 plus times. He's thinking, I'll just tap this guy and let's get out of here quickly. So, the whole training together thing really does play into it for me, and it kind of leaves me unknown because obviously I don't have any information about them training sessions. So it'll all play out in the octagon, and I think it's a really good fight. And Usman is on his way to be, you know, really cement himself as a dominant welterweight champion. You know, you take out Burns, who is the genuine number one contender. That's a huge win. And then, you know, there's plenty more for him to do, but very impressive. And then for Burns, you know, this is obviously a title shot. He's going to have to grab it with both hands.
Yeah, and I think a very similar fight to this one is the fight where Usman fought Maia. He didn't go to ground with Maia once. I think Maia took his back, but the ref pulled him off even more. That was a real controversial one, that one. But he never engaged Maia on the ground, whereas like when Burns fought Maia, he was happy to grapple with Maia because he respected his skill but thought he was also just as skilled, and he managed to get the finish there. So I expect Usman to try and keep this standing. I just don't think he's going to try and initiate any grappling. And if he does get the win here, he's probably I don't want to say it lightly, but he might be the greatest welterweight of all time, because you look at what he's done. He has beaten probably 4 of the top 5 from memory. He's beaten Tyron Woodley. He's just dominated everyone he's fought against. I don't think he's lost in the UFC. His one loss was outside the organization. And I can't see him losing anytime soon if he gets past Burns here.
No, I'd say definitely GSP is. Well, for me, GSP is the GOAT, full stop. Definitely the welterweight go by, you know, a million miles for me. But Usman could be second, you know, could be. Woodley had a good run as well. I think anyone besides GSP really at this point is just not in the conversation, because Usman, he's been impressive, but, you know, he's still got questions to answer, in my opinion. Like, for me, he's got to fight Covington again. Leon Edwards questions there. There's Wonderboy is still knocking about. So there's a lot going on for him, and he's got a lot to prove. But it doesn't mean he's not capable of doing it. And you know, when all said and done, we could be speaking about him at that level. So I totally agree on that point.
For sure. We'll jump to the co-main event. We have the women's flyweight bout between Macy Barber and Alexa Grasso. Barber's return after taking that loss in it was January of last year, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the Conor McGregor card where he fought Cowboy. She took a loss there to Roxanne Modafferi, taking a step back in competition to fight Grasso. Still got that number 10 ranking next to her name. So this is a bit of a jumping, a good fight for Grasso here. If she can get a win over number 10, she takes herself from 15 to number 10. So I think there's a lot more to lose for Barber here, especially coming off that last loss.
Yeah, and she's just... It shows you what a star she is. Is she in the co-main event spot here? It's a weird spot for to have it in, but I think the UFC are just banking on her being a star. I think she's 21, 22 now, and she's coming back from a tough loss and a tough injury. So Alexa Grasso, as you said, got it all to win here. 27 years old, just made a flyweight debut. She looked good in that one. It's going to be interesting. I expect Barber to win. I expect it to, you know, she's a big flyweight. I expect her to come in and really put it on Grasso and potentially get a finish. But it depends how she bounces back from that. You know, that was a tough loss, a tough injury to suffer, and this is still one of the toughest fights she's had in her career. So interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think this is a bit of a more favourable matchup for her, especially in the return, because Grasso's not going to go out there and wrestle her, I don't think. I think Grasso's going to kind of keep it standing and try and trade with her. And we've seen Barber in the past just overwhelms people with her power. And she couldn't do it to Modafferi. Granted, she was injured, but hey, that injury was in the middle of the fight, and she was losing before the injury as well. So hopefully in this one, we can see her bounce back and get another win and, yeah, see where she's going. Because for a second there, people were talking about, like, speed running her to a title show, you know, like there was a lot of hype behind her name. Then she took that loss. Let's see how she bounces back. Before that, we have the middleweights. Kelvin Gaslin makes his return against Ian Heinisch. What are your thoughts on this one?
Huge fight for Kelvin anyway, because he needs a win bad, like really bad, because he's lost and he's looked bad losing. You know, last time out, Hermansson tapped him really quick. Against, was it Till? He didn't even get going in that fight, and then obviously he lost to Adesanya, and And maybe that's just took it out of him, being so close to the title, then coming up short. And, you just get the adrenaline dump and you're just like a bit bummed about it. And it seems to have carried over into these fights. But I've been a big fan of Kelvin ever since the tough days. I thought he'd be a champion by now. I thought he's that talented. And it just seems to be the weight he's fighting at middleweight. He's fighting against guys who are so much bigger than him. And he's at a disadvantage. I'd prefer him to see a welterweight if he can get back down there. But it doesn't look like he's got any interest in that. Whatever happens, I think he's got enough to win this fight. I think he should be able to, catch Ian Heinisch and he should be able to finish him. But, Ian's game, and we spoke to him the other day, and he's coming for the win. This be probably the biggest win of his career. And, so he's got a lot to win, but it's all on Kelvin for me. I think Kelvin's got to really go in there, do it, get the job done, and get back in the mix because he's too talented to be on a 3-fight losing streak.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a make or break fight for Gaslin at this point. And I just don't see Heinisch having the finishing ability to take Gaslin out, where I think Gaslin probably does land something big and take Heinisch out. Although, Harnish has surprised me before. He could go 3 rounds here and outpoint him, but I think Kelvin's too powerful. I think he's while he's small, he's able to get in the pocket and land big shots. We saw him against Adesanya, who's the champion, and a lot of people are super high on him. They think he could be double champion. Who knows by the end of next month? And Gaslin gave me his toughest challenge yet. There was points there where it looked like it was going to be game over for Adesanya. He was injured a couple of times in that fight. Granted, Gaslin also injured, also finished the 5th on the floor, but, he's a talented fighter. He has power in his hands. There's no reason he can't get a finish in this fight.
No, I expect that. Obviously, I don't think Harnish has ever been knocked out, so that would be a really good statement win if Kelvin was able to do that. But besides that, he's just got to get back in the win column. Don't worry about anything else right now. Go in, do your thing, be busy. Just win the fight. And I think that last one particularly was a tough loss, a really quick one to Hermanson, who he was favoured to beat as well. So he needs a win. I expect him to get a win. Really spectacular, not spectacular, it really doesn't matter, but I expect him to get it.
For sure. Before that, we had the bantamweights. Pedro Munoz taking on Jimmy Rivera. This should be a really fun fight. Both guys are probably happy to stand there and brawl with each other. We know Munoz that's his style. Rivera's coming off a win. I believe it was against Cody Stamann. Am I right in saying that?
Might have been. Yeah, I think they did fight Cody. Yeah, Cody Stamann.
That's right. So he's coming off a win. Munoz coming off a loss to Edgar. Perfect matchmaking for both these guys. Not much more I can say on this one. What are your thoughts?
It's a really good fight, and it's towards the top of the division. So I'd say whoever wins this is kind of in the mix. Obviously they don't have the name value of the guys you mentioned. Guys you can mention such as like Cejudo and Dillashaw and Dominic Cruz and people like that, but they've got the talent in the mix, and it's similar to the Ben Aldarush Diego Ferreira thing, where whoever wins this fight can kind of propel themselves into a position where they're fighting in a really big fight next. And Jimmy Rivera, he's only lost recently to Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling, who are about to fight for the belt, so that just shows you his level. Before that, it was Marlon Moraes. So if you're not a top fighter, you're not beating him, and he already holds a win over Pedro. So I expect this to be really competitive. I think Pedro might get it back though. I think he might edge it out on the cards. I think either way, it's going to be tight. I think people might be complaining about the decision, but I think it's going to be a fun 3-round fight. For
sure. What are your thoughts on this card fight that opens the card between Maki Patolo and Julian Marquez?
You gotta like the middleweights. I always like seeing these guys in the card. Patolo, I think this is make a great fight for him because I've watched his last 2 fights and he didn't look good. Dan Stewart found it really easy to beat him. Imper Kasangnia decisioned him and he battled him really. And we've seen, Imper got beat by Buckley, who has since got beat by Alessio. So this is towards the bottom of the middleweight division. The loser could be leaving town here. I haven't got a prediction for you, but it's a big fight for both of these guys because they're on the pay-per-view main card. It's a big showcase, and you could be potentially fighting for your UFC career right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The stakes are probably make or break at this point. And main card. This is a weird one to be the main card given everything that's on the prelims. But hey, good spotlight for them. If someone can go out there and do something impressive, it'll just be fantastic, I mean, we saw what Buckley was able to do at the time that he pulled off something crazy. So, power to him. The prelims, we got the feature prelim between Jim Miller and Bobby Green. I feel like this is a rematch. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I feel like we've probably seen this somewhere, but this is just because these two guys have been around for so long, fighting each other for so long. Fighting in the UFC for so long, you'd expect them to have fought each other, but I'm not actually sure they have.
Yeah, right.
I think they've had common opponents recently, but I don't think they've actually fought each other. So somehow these have gone several years without clashing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, huge fights. Bobby Green looked great in 2020. He lost his last fight, but before that, he was on a 3-fight win streak. He looked really good. And then Jim Miller, he also had a good 2020 from what I can remember. Who did he face? I think he beat Roosevelt Roberts, didn't he? And Clay Guida, maybe?
Yep, sounds right to me.
Roosevelt Roberts, beat Clay Guida in 2019, actually. So both of these guys, veterans, very interested to see who wins. I think Bobby Green is potentially closer to being a contender. The fact that he was able to put 3 wins together in the UFC lightweight division is still huge. But Jim Miller on his night can cause anyone problems. So very, very interesting. Very, very fun fight as well. I think, looking at potential fights tonight, this is one I would be looking at and looking forward to. So can't wait. I edged Bobby Green, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, Green did look fantastic. Even his rematch against Venata, he looked really good. Whereas Miller looked good against Clay Guida in his last time out. I believe that was his last time out. I could be wrong, but I think it was. So both guys that are, I'd say, been around a while. I do expect Green to win this. I expect him to stay on the feet for the most part, and I expect him to just outpoint Miller.
Yeah, I think Green's got a lot going on for him. I think he was on the verge of becoming, a potential contender if he beat Thiago Moses last time, and it just didn't go his way. But I expect him to win. I expect him to, potentially even get a stoppage here. So huge fight, really fun fight as well. I like seeing these guys. I've said it a lot. These older legends or veterans. I like seeing them fight each other, and this is a good one.
For sure. I'm really keen for this fight before that between Rodolfo Vieira and Anthony Hernandez. Vieira is decorated jiu-jitsu champion, impressive grappler, and a really good addition to the UFC's middleweight division. Undefeated, if I'm correct. I believe he's undefeated. Taking on Anthony Hernandez, who is also a great grappler himself. But the last time I remember seeing him out, I don't think it was his last outing, but the last memory I have, maybe it was him getting finished by Kevin Holland with TKO knees. So he needs to bounce back, if I'm right, and he's taking on an undefeated fighter. So a big risky gamble here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a really good chance for Hernandez to prove himself. He's got a submission loss on his record, so that kind of tells you that potentially he may be susceptible to someone as talented as Vieira. Can he get it done? And how high are these levels? Like, can he compete at this level, really? Because I think Anthony Hernandez is probably the toughest fight of his career. He's got a win over Jordan Wright, even though it was overturned to a no contest from the Contender Series. He's competed, and obviously you can get finished by Kevin Holland. But besides that, he's looked good, and it's a really good test, which I'm very interested to see. Another great fight on this card, which I think stacked. It's missing the star name maybe in the main event, but it's really, the fights top to bottom are really fun, and this is just another one of them.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw Vieira's last time out against Safarov. I had it on my shortlist for submissions of the year last year because he got damaged. His eye was busted, and it was shut, actually. His eye shut. And he just kept coming forward like the Terminator, took him down and submitted him right after. It was just impressive. And I expect him to do the same in this one. I expect him to just impose his will, because that's what he's done throughout his whole career. Both his UFC wins are from arm triangle submissions, and he's just imposed his wrestling game. And I expect him to do the same. So, but it'll be a fun one to watch. And like I said, I'm really hyped on Vieira, so hopefully he delivers and I don't have to recap this one being upset about the loss. Before that, we have the welterweights, Belal Muhammad and Diego Lima. I believe this is rebooked. I think it was meant to happen last year. I could be wrong. What are your thoughts on the matchup?
Another really fun one. I think it's really competitive. I think they're doing really well, the matchmakers, of putting on really competitive, close fights where I'm just like, these are toss-ups. And Mohammed, he's been really impressive lately, 3 in a row. He looked really good against Lyman Good last time out. That was a really impressive win. But it's been a minute since we've seen him, since June. So he'll need to get back into it. But he's lost one fight in about, 7 or 8. Lost to Jeff Neal. One loss in 8 fights against Jeff Neal. It's not to be sniffed at. He's a potential contender at welterweight, and a fight against Diego Lima, who I do expect them to get by, but he's on a nice 3-fight win streak of his own. So it's wide open, but he hasn't fought since October 2019. So I expect him to look the rustier one. I expect Mohammed to win this fight.
Yeah, I tend to think the same. I think Muhammad's been booked multiple times. He's been in training camp for multiple fights. He just hasn't really... I think I remember his last time out. When was his last time out?
June it was.
June. Okay, so it wasn't that long ago. But, he's been in there, and his only loss is that one to Jeff Neal, and that's no scrub he's lost to. He's lost to a high-ranked contender who just fought Wonderboy, of all people. I do expect him to just impose himself and get a KO probably early in this fight. I could be wrong, but if I had to make a prediction on this one, I'm taking Mohammed.
Yeah, me too. All
right. Before that, opening the prelims, we have Polyana Viana versus Mallory Martin.
Yeah, I'm picking Mallory Martin. I think she's a couple or at least 1 or 2 levels above her opponents. I think Polyana Viana is the bottom of the barrel in terms of strawweights in the UFC. I think she got a win over Emily Whitmire. Besides that, I'm not particularly impressed. I'm not impressed by Emily Whitmire. So whereas her opponent Martin has some nice wins on there. She beat Hannah Cyphers, who also beat Viana. So a bit of MMA math said she's going to win. It's not always reliable, but I expect it to myself. This is the fight I'm least looking forward to on the card. I got to be honest. I think this is 2 of the lower level strawweights competing against each other. I expect Martin to win, but I don't expect her to go and win a UFC title after this. But as we said, huge card, huge opportunity. Go and make a statement. Go and prove people like me who are sitting on the armchair watching the fight wrong, and cement yourself as a potential strawweight contender, because strawweight's stacked. It's a really big division, and a couple of wins in that division, and you're getting talked about it with the likes of Rose Namajunas and Weili Zhang. So there's lots to be earned. I just don't think either of these fighters are capable of it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely one I'm not too familiar with, either of those fighters. So I'm not going to really give my opinion on that one since I'm not sure. But we'll jump on to the early prelims. Like you mentioned them before, these are pretty decent for early prelims, especially the main one, Ricky Symone taking on Brian Callahan in a rebooked match. I was initially meant to happen on Fight Island, but it's been moved here. Awesome fight. Should be a bit of a brawl unless Ricky Symone decides to grapple, which I assume he will because it's the easiest route to victory in this one for him, I imagine. But this could be a fight of night contender here.
Yeah, I expect Ricky to win this fight quite dominantly. Might be by decision, but I expect him to dominate Brian Callahan, who is a really fun fighter. He's a puncher, but Symone is just, I think, a bit more polished, a bit more. If you have to pick, give me £100 to put on one of these to become a champion, it'd be Ricky on back, and I think he's a really impressive fighter. He looked great against Ray Borg. In his last fight, he looked great as well. And his last 2 losses were Rob Font and Uriah Faber. So they're really tough fighters. He's got a win over Marab, and he's very young as well. He's 28, so I think he's got it all to win on this fight. I think he should be going out there making a statement, dominating Brian Callahan, and I think he will.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Is there any of these 2 other early prelims you want to touch on, or we'll wrap it up?
We'll just give them a shout out because Philip Rowe, he looked really impressive. I think it was a UFC debut last time. Big power puncher from what I can remember. And who did he beat last time? Just check.
Last time out, it looks like it's his debut. Maybe it was on Contender Series.
Yeah, he looked brilliant on the Contender Series, I think. Yeah, he looked great on the Contender Series. So very interested to see him fight. I think he's been booked and had a few fights cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And Gabe Green, I think he looked good against was it Daniel Hernandez as well? That was a fun fight. Yeah, he's had 3 fights cancelled, Philip Rowe, and we've seen him. I think a few have been last minute as well. So be good to finally see him actually get his UFC run. But in terms of fights I'm interested in, this Miranda Maverick against Gillian Robinson one is really, really something I'm keeping an eye out. Miranda Maverick, 23 years old, and she's got a ton of hype behind her. And did you see her last fight where the opponent was cut, weren't she? Right across the...
Yep. Yeah, I remember that one.
She looked fantastic, and she's really exciting to watch, and it's just exciting because she's 23 years old, and she's did she win the Invicta tournament? She's got to win over Pearl Gonzalez. It's really exciting to see her in this position and straight against Gillian Robinson, who I quite rate. I really do. She lost the last one, but she's a really tough fight, and if you're not ready, she will, she'll out-grapple you, she'll dominate you. Really fun fight to open the card. And as I said earlier, I'll be watching this from the start because it really is a stacked card full of fun fights, early prelims to the main event. It's going to be a fun watch, and I can't wait.
Absolutely, and so we'll speak to you after the action to recap all those fights. But yeah, should be a good one, headlined by the welterweight title fight. Thanks for watching, guys.